A very good evening to all our viewers. This is yet another edition of the Evening Review. My name is Trayvon Jabela, your host for tonight. Let's have a quick look at today's front page of Namibian Sun.
I, Frankie, pledge to build a band of brothers.
I, Michael, I pledge to define myself by my character.
I, Gesser, pledge to use my strength for good.
My name is Ethan, and I pledge to nurture my fields.
I am Aubrey, and I pledge to make the world a better place.
My name is Salatiel Shinedima, the Executive Director of Women's Action for Development, and I pledge to mentor the next generation.
Christmas tree, oh Christmas tree, thy leaves are so unchanging. Not only green when summer's here, but also when 'tis cold and drear. Oh Christmas tree, thy leaves are so unchanging.
Tonight, we are joined by Linda Baumann, who is a gender activist, feminist, and anything related to particularly women's rights. And of course, she's talking to us tonight about events related to yesterday's celebration of Human Rights Day, which is also Women's Day in Namibia. Linda, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, sure. Let's start with feminism. Because I think there's a lot of misinterpretations and a lot of different understandings of the term feminism itself. That's why now people are talking about radical feminism, maybe moderate feminism and stuff like that. In which category do you find yourself?
Well, let's first define what feminism is, because feminism stems from challenging the notions of patriarchy.
Yeah.
And this is when women stands up, and that's where women's rights emanates from.
Yeah.
But feminists are not angry people, because a lot of men feel that we're angry towards you guys. And I love you for who you are. There's nothing wrong with you, but you must be able to respect me for who I am.
Yeah.
And that also remember that as equal as we're sitting here, we're able to administer life together.
Indeed.
So that's the basis. But also there are different ideologies of feminism. That's the radical feminists. There is this transformational feminist. So there's all of this. For me, I'm just a very basic feminist who can be radical or uses all mediums of ideologies to be able to have a progressive engagement that would be able to have us to have a mutual understanding of where we're supposed to be going. And I think that's where we are as feminists, because we go into spaces in order to ensure equality and equity is attained for all of us as women, but also most advancedly for our children that we are representing, and for men to realize that the power that they use over us should not be the way they advance it, because we're just as humans as they are.
Indeed. Now, yesterday there was an appointment of, there was an announcement of the appointment of the new CEO of Krem. It's a woman, and you know, I was just checking Twitter there, people saying, yeah, the future is female. Things like that. What does that even mean? Future is female, where does that leave me as a man? Do I have a space in the future in your world as a feminist?
Always. There's no way we're able to move and shape and advance things in this country if all species or all genders are not included. That also runs to the smallest child. Yeah. And I think what men are probably fearful is the whole form of we're able to do what they've claimed we can't do. And I think that's your level of own insecurities. You can't bring that upon us. Yeah. What people are saying is acknowledging the transformation and the change that is happening. And let's admit it, Krem has always just had men as CEOs, you know. And I think that is a change. And it probably would also now give other women in the industry that opportunity to say, I can get there. Because if this woman has gotten there, probably this is where gender parity in that industry is going to advance. And we also know that industry is very emasculate. And that we can't undo that. But the fact that the estrogen is now there to dilute the testosterone, I think it's just an amazing journey that we are going to be supporting our fellow women.
Sure. Now, yesterday, of course, was Human Rights Day, stroke Women's Day in Namibia. And a lot of Namibians don't seem to understand that, because yesterday I posted on my WhatsApp status my wife, and I say, Happy Women's Day. And all my friends who could read that were saying, no, you are wrong, today's Human Rights Day. Reflect for me how it came about that we have this two-in-one in Namibia.
So it's important to understand that a number of there's human rights, and there is the Women's Day. So human rights carries its own history on its own in terms of how the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration in 1948. And that, of course, advanced to ensuring that a lot of nations signed up to ensure all citizens of their countries are equal and are respected and are dignified for persons that they are. So, and then in 1959, this is where the uprising in this country started, from where women stood up and spoke against the apartheid regime regarding us having to relocate to where we are living right now in Katutura. And that's where also we've lost a lot of lives in the massacre that took place. And I think that's where Namibia has taken this day as Women's Day. And a lot of Namibians don't know it, because Namibians confuse South Africa's Women's Day in August on the 8th as Women's Day, and then you have March that also has the International Women's Day. So we need to be able to segregate, because Namibians mainly celebrate South Africans' Women's Day, and that shouldn't be the case, because we need to now reignite and re-talk about our history of this particular day, so that women, us as women, are able to celebrate it, but also say, as we are celebrating Women's Day, we're also celebrating human rights, and women's human rights are part of it. And I think that's the basic distinction of these 2 days, but also commemorated because it speaks to our history of apartheid into freedom and human rights protection for all. Yeah.
As someone who monitors closely matters related to human rights, where do we stand as a country? Where do we rank, not in exact numbers that we are fifth or whatever, but just in general terms, where do we stand as a democracy and as a constitutional, of course, a constitutional democracy where the rights of people are supposed to be respected?
I always say this as when I go around the world. I'm proud to be a Namibian. I feel our human rights ranking is very high. But the extended conversation to that question speaks to the promise that the Constitution has made to ensure that justice, peace, and stability is advanced. And I think we've lived it, and we are living that reality for the past 30 years. I think the underlying question is, what are the human rights issues that impacts that question of yours when it comes to where do we rank? Because we have very good systems. We have also very good frameworks that interlinks to ensure that human rights are protected, but also justice is served in the same line. So this leads me to the thought of the challenge that we are faced with when we have to think about human rights, because a layman on the street could say to me, no, Linda, my human rights are not protected because they're facing a particular human rights challenge. And I think for us as in this country, the main thing for me that stands out in my head, it's the whole judicial system. We have a judicial system that is slow and the enforcement thereof, which means a lot of people have pre-trial waitings that are so long, and then also we talk about the conditions thereof, and it's another, so that already is a big issue for me. Then you have underlying factors that speaks about women's protection and rights, and we're talking about sexual and gender-based violence, we're talking about broad issues of children's rights, we're talking about broad issues of minority rights, and I think for me that those are the basic elements, issues of employment, issues of poverty. These are basic things that many feel as that their human rights are not protected. And I think that's where you have to really contextualize every form of that question to be able to advance it, but be proud as Namibians. We are living in a country where we are able to at least still navigate and not fear for our lives on the streets out there.
Indeed. Let's talk about sexual minorities. It's a space that I think you've also, over the years, been very preoccupied with, advocating for rights, for example, of homosexuals. I don't even know if those are the words that I used lately.
Don't worry, feel comfortable. It's okay.
Yeah. Where do we stand insofar as the protection of particularly these groups is concerned in Namibia?
Yeah, in terms of language, I understand that a number of people do not know how to call our community, and some use LGBT, some use a general statement as homosexual, and though this whole community of ours is very diverse. It's important to note that, and as a person who's been working in the LGBT community for years, I commend my country and the state for having enabling legislative frameworks that still allows us to utilize and benefit from. That is one thing that we need to give credit to our state.
Sure.
We need to also give credit to the country where we're able to operate as LGBT organizations. But in 1994, when our uprising started, there was one organization. Today we have about 10 organizations. That shows about how progressive the state is, but also the institutions that we're operating. And that speaks to your question again around human rights. That basically means that the country upholds human rights, the diversity, and also the freedom of expression that comes with it. Where what we are faced with the challenge is the basic human rights elements of protection, safety, and also ensuring recognition is given. We have not had any head of states in this country saying that I recognize the existence of LGBTI people in this country. They form part of the national development process of basic needs that needs to be attained. But also I acknowledge as the head of state that they experience discrimination, stigma, and prejudice. However, we must embrace our children. That statement could change the way homophobia and transphobia is experienced, because then you will not have this excuse about, are you hungry? Do you get killed? You don't have to be killed to feel that your human rights are violated. And in Namibia, we don't have that level of brutality. We have high levels of abuse. And I think for the LGBTI community, there's also the element of the sodomy law that people and Namibians connect only to the LGBT community, which is not the case. Trevor, you yourself, as you are sitting here, that law affects you because you are practicing also unnatural sexual offenses. And I don't think Namibians have explored what that law says, because then that law shouldn't even exist. It's a 1927 law. And that is one of the biggest laws that cripples our existence, because people's interpretation of that law means that homosexuality is illegal. While it's not illegal in this country, I can hold my partner and walk on the street. Nobody can say and do anything. I cannot be locked up. But then at the same time, you have the Criminal Procedures Act that actually advances the sodomy law in case there's suspicion. Then they can come and break your door, while Article 13 of the Constitution talks about the right to privacy. So the intersectionalities of these legislations are key. The other part that I want to talk about around that also hampers is the whole issue of domestic violence. Namibians believe that we do not experience domestic violence within our relationships as the LGBT community. And the exclusion of us in that is very big, because at the end of the day, the violence you experience is no different. The only difference is the sex.
Yes.
And that is what people, or the gender of the person. And that is what people do not understand, because I need to be protected at all levels and not be seen that this is an assault case, because don't treat my relationship as nothing. And I think the time has come that we have a national dialogue. And I'd say a national dialogue, not just the LGBT community, but all levels of stakeholders, and also making sure that the media gets involved, because the level of sensationalism just to be able to amplify a stereotype sometimes is problematic, but we must also acknowledge the progress that has happened in the transformation of change from the media, because every month somewhere in a paper you will see something written that speaks about that, about our community.
Indeed. And Linda, about speaking of those rights, one of the key narratives now that has emerged in recent years is same-sex marriages, which is not legal in Namibia, and people in that space go to South Africa and the likes to get married and come back to the country, which is a class issue, because only a few people in this country can afford actually to fly or travel by road all the way to Cape Town and book venues and stuff like that. There are gay people in this country who cannot afford those privileges, and their rights to then be married to whoever they like somehow is hampered.
So there are two levels of the discussion for me. As somebody who's worked in this movement for almost 20 years now, I respect the notion of the same-sex marriage agenda that needs to go forth. But at the same time, how do I ask for same-sex marriage if my country doesn't recognize my existence? My country does not mainstream integrate and also ensure that my representation in service delivery is attained. That is what is core to me, because if that level of service delivery policy framework is in place, it immediately advances policy and legal framework to also ensure that the protection of LGBT people should take place. Namibians already are homophobic and transphobic towards the discussion of same-sex marriage. Let's get rid of the sodomy law if need be. Let's get rid of laws that are very directly violating. We don't even have a hate speech law that can at least moderate and control people's words towards us. So for me, is the agenda for me right now, it's about the recognition and the rights of LGBT people. Yes, marriage is a discussion and it takes a lot of institutions to shape it, and it will actually it will take us 10 steps back. But if I'm able to reap fruits of the country, because there is a lot of policy frameworks that ensures that LGBT people are protected. You can go on medical aid with your partner. That's of course private, that's also a privilege. Those that are going to South Africa to go get married, that's a complete privilege, because many of us, I would rather want to get married in this country. Many people tell me that there's something wrong with me. I've said it so many times in this country. If you want to do and test any conversion therapy on a Namibian, try me and see. My family tried. The conversion didn't happen. I am still as lesbian as ever. It will never change. But I'm contributing to this country because I have a purpose. And I think that is how we should be looked at, because people's headache goes into what does Linda do in the bedroom. I've raised beautiful children. I'm a grandmother to children. I'm an aunt to a lot of children. So that basically means I can hold a family no different from you as Tuevo. Don't get worried about how I do and what I do in my bedroom, because that is why this human rights discussion that we're having and the consciousness of Chapter 3 and the protection of everybody, that needs to be applied and not have personal prejudice come over, because allowed to get to know me and figure out whether I am initially the problem child that you claimed me to be, because I still continue contributing to this country, but this country needs to realize that I exist and I need to be protected and not to be pushed away.
Indeed. You see, what is good, Linda, and about your work is obviously that you are in the lesbian space, but you don't just confine yourself to that. You still go beyond that and really look at broader rights issues as far as they concern women. Which brings me to my next question, which is the last question also. This consistent displeasure with how the Minister of Gender Equality pronounces herself on matters related to women's rights, GBV, and so forth. And every other week, she comes out with really outrageous comments. If she's not saying that women who are withdrawing cases must be jailed, she's saying something else. And there's, of course, this persistent calls now by some groups to say she must step down, resign, or be moved to another portfolio. Do you follow these things, and what do you make of them?
You see, for me, is when I look at leadership, I believe that a leader should be able to be diverse in understanding and should be able to contextualize every reality.
Yeah.
Now, her statement is very irresponsible. It's irresponsible because you are judging certain women.
Yeah.
You're supposed to represent all women. That's the first thing for me, and that's wrong.
Yeah.
How you dissect that contextual background, because she's not giving background to contextualize her reasoning.
Yeah.
Because that's where we as activists are challenging her. And that is where we are challenging that notion and are getting to a place of, is she really competent to be able to govern the diversity of women's experiences and realities?
Yeah.
Her main issue right now is to protect the woman, whether she wants to get out of it or whether she wants to move back into the relationship. Because people must remember, most of the women who go through this process where they withdraw cases are mainly married ones also, because the families are involved.
Yes.
And in that discussion of our minister saying that her whole statement, she forgets about the child that is also the recipient of that scenery when that happens. And I think there's all layers, and I think if she contextualized her reasoning, then that would have been right. But for me, she was irresponsible, and she remains irresponsible in her statement. She owes us an apology as women, because many women are affected. Many more women have withdrawn those cases, and I think she owes that to this nation, for the nation, for us to be able to understand what she meant, what her background around this is. This week we sat in a panel discussion at a local restaurant called Tikwen. There were 5 eye stories that came, and one of the ladies that were sitting there was, and most of the cases were all the cases that were reported on. The guy who got 32 years with the panga, the mother shared the story. And for her to recall and be able to say, I saw my child's brain all over the township, and I don't still get that level of support, because I just get support around my people that is there. She is supposed to be thinking as the minister about how social services should be advanced. How do I make sure I get to understand why the woman wants to withdraw the case? And does she have a safety net for to be able to not to go back to where she is? And I think she needs to come back, take off her shoes, her high heels, and put on slippers and walk with us in the streets and be able to sit and listen to the realities, because this is where us as women's rights activists will not tolerate irresponsible statements that affects our realities, because many of the stories are personalized. And when it affects me, it affects the next woman. And I think that is, and she needs to be held accountable for it. And if it means that we need to go back to basic gender sensitization with her, we do have the time for it.
Indeed.
Yes.
Linda, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate your time. That's Linda Baumann. She's a women's rights activist. Of course, her activism crosses a lot of spectrums. And as you heard her speak, of course, about a variety of topics related to those subjects. And I hope you have a better perspective on things now, like I do tonight. Good night.
Christmas tree, oh Christmas tree, thy leaves are so unchanging. Not only green when summer's here, but also when 'tis cold and drear. Oh Christmas tree, thy leaves are so unchanging. Christmas tree, oh Christmas tree, thy leaves are so unchanging. Not only green when summer's here, but also when 'tis cold and drear. Oh Christmas tree, thy leaves are so unchanging.
Imagine if it was your daughter, your mother, your sister. Please, my brothers, let us stop the senseless killing of our women.
Abusing of alcohol is no excuse to women abuse.
As a champion man, I acknowledge the impact of women abuse and gender-based violence in Namibia.
We pledge not to stay silent for the pain of our Namibian women. We pledge to always take action against women abuse.